Judd Hill Plantation. If only a piece of land could tell the stories about the people who have farmed these 5,800 acres of land. From each cotton boll that fell into a bag to the massive tractors that now roam the cotton rows, Judd Hill is the story of the evolution of farming. Orange Judd Hill was a wealthy banker from Kansas City, Missouri. He arrived in Arkansas in 1925 with money to spend. Orange spent the money on this land, had his brother William to farm it, until he headed west. The Depression was not good for Orange and his wife Lena and his daughter Esther Jane. Times were hard during the Depression and the land was not profitable. Eventually, Esther Jane married a bright young engineer named Sam Chapin, and the fortunes of the farm began to change. Jane Lee Chapin Riddle is their granddaughter.
My great-grandfather bought this land and was contracted with the Springfield Coopers Company to log it. And they came down here, and that's when everybody was logging off the land here, between here, the ridge and the Mississippi River. And it was just mostly swamp through here. Sunken lands is what they called it, because in 1812 they had that big earthquake and everything kind of went to marsh. So anyway, they came in and they started draining the land and clearing it off, and I don't know exactly why, but he gave it to my grandmother and my grandfather if he quit his job and came down here to manage the place. I don't know if it was having trouble or if he didn't have time for it or what, but that's the deal. Is after my grandfather got that job as a junior engineer up there in Three Rivers, he came down here to manage the place. And there was a house down there on the corner that just burned last year. And that was called the bungalow. That's the original house that they lived in.
Jane's grandfather was a very astute businessman. Sam and Esther took their wedding gift, the Judd Hill Plantation, and turned it into a successful farming operation. The Chapins cleared the land and then began to produce cotton, corn, and wheat. With nearly 6,000 acres and limited technology, the Chapins had to rely on tenants and sharecroppers to help make the plantation profitable. Only 3 years after arriving, Sam and Esther had only one child, a son, Sam V. Chapin, who they hoped one day would run the farm. But those plans quickly vanished.
My dad was born, I think, in 28. He was 37, I think, when he died, and I was 13. And he wasn't around much. He worked as an airplane mechanic, and he was gone a lot. And my older brother was born in 1948. There's 4.5 years difference. And as soon as he was born, my dad had a wreck, and my mama was taking care of him, so my grandparents here got guardianship. And so he was raised here in this house, as theirs. And they groomed him to take over the place.
Approximately 70 families lived and worked on the plantation. The Hills relied on 3 different groups to provide labor: tenants, sharecroppers, and day laborers. Some tenants even received 40 acres and a mule to work the plantation. The sharecroppers, like most everyone else in the Delta, grew cotton on their plots and paid a portion of their harvest to the Chapins in exchange for their parcel of land. Judd Hill was much more than a farm. It was a place where people were born, lived, worked, were educated, and even died. One such family who lived Judd Hill was Pearline W. Norman, who along with her mother, grandmother, 4 aunts, and 2 uncles arrived in the mid-30s to sharecrop. Unfortunately, the 1937 flood hit the Delta region. Pearline's mother went away and didn't come back. She passed away, leaving her grandmother to raise her on Judd Hill.
So I remember when I was about 10, I carried water in the field, the choppers, and was chopping cotton until I got old enough to chop. When I got old enough to chop, chopped and picked cotton.
At that time, Judd Hill was a busy place then, with families coming and going.
It was a different place back then when I was growing up. I mean, there were houses everywhere, people everywhere. It was really a bustling place. I mean, it was really, you had the church down there, and which was also a school, and it was just the store was open and the gin was going, and the blacksmith shop down there was just, it was a busy place. It was a fun place. The lot down here, which is what we call the cattle lot, the horse lot. There was a gate here at the end of this drive here, and there was a gate down there, and a gate down there. There was no through to Truman or anywhere else, and all the gates were locked. You had cows, you kept them in, and they had the weight station down there at the lot, and they had a man that lived in this big house out there in the back, and his name was Emmett Thompson and Rosie, and they had like 19, 21 kids. So I'd go down there. I loved going down there. I go down there and see the little babies and play with them. And Emmett let me drive a tractor when I was 5. Just sit on it and steer it while he threw out the feed. And my grandfather found out about that, and I wasn't allowed back down at the lot. Besides that, I had asthma. And they had soybeans and cotton, and it was just it was dusty down there, and it didn't do me any good. But so that's the reason I was given for not being able to go down there anymore.
My experience started with it in 1960. My dad moved here, rented some land and moved here in the fall of 1960, and started farming in 1961 was his first crop. And I've been here ever since. I grew up on the farm. I've watched a lot of changes take place, and just up to today, there's been a lot of changes.
Not only was Judd Hill about family, it was about long, hard work. There were many who worked hard on the plantation to make money, including Pearline Norman's family.
I guess it was bitter and sweet. It wasn't that good, but I didn't know no better. And so we survived because we raised a garden, and we canned fruit, peaches and peas, and we just pretty well raised a lot of stuff, causing us to survive. They paid less because we lived on farm. They didn't pay like $2 a day, $2.50 a day. To make more money, we'd had to go off and catch a truck and make a dollar extra. And I started doing housework. I worked for the Chapels when I was up there. In that 2-story house they got up there. It's there yet. And I did some housework for her and Ernestine, Juddy and his wife and children. So I did a lot of work, and I worked Truman. When they didn't want me, I'd go to Truman and do some housework.
Pearline Norman did more than just housework. She also picked cotton.
I remember when my first kid was born out there, I picked 214 pounds of cotton, and my baby was born that night. That day I picked 214 pounds of cotton. But I would pick them in little sacks and put them in the big sack. I didn't pull nothing heavy. I just pick it and put them in this little sack, in the big sack, and then my husband would take the sack to the wagon and weigh it. And I remember that day because everybody was amazed at me. I was smart that day. And my baby was born that night. First child. But that was on Judd Hill.
Although the sharecroppers picked and chopped cotton while the black farmers used the mules to farm the land, white farmers were able to rent equipment to carry out their daily tasks.
For the sharecroppers, they had their land that they worked, they took care of. The difference was, like I said, for the first few years we were here, the black farmers used mules, and the other people that were renting the ground came in, and of course my dad had tractors and cotton pickers, stuff like that. But I picked cotton by hand, and I've chopped a lot of cotton here on Judd Hill as a child. As far as the major differences, the technology part of it, you know, the tractors and stuff, they didn't have that. You know, and I guess that would be one of the big differences in it. And shortly after we were here, 2 or 3 years, you know, the family started moving on, going to town. I guess getting, you know, jobs at factories, stuff like that, to have a better way of life. You know.
But most of Poinsett County was still agricultural.
Well, in the fall of '60, when we came here, there was still land that was being farmed with mules. And, you know, the technology of today is it just overwhelms you at times, because I see where it was at in 1960 when I was a child to where it is today, and the science that has got involved in farming. You know, the genetics that they use in the seed now. We had to chop cotton as kids because there was not a chemical that would take care of the grass and weeds. Now, you know, everything is done with chemical. We still use some plows, but not like we did back then. And the big thing, the big change is, you know, used to there was a family on about every 40 acres here. But as time evolved, people started moving away. And so it kept becoming less and less farmers. And so the ones that stayed were farming more and more ground until it's where it's at now. You know, me and my son farmed the whole plantation.
The Judd Hill plantation grew to even include a school and church house for the black families.
Well, they turn school out. They call it split turns. Split turns, and we'd have to, when the cotton chop, we'd be out chopping cotton. And then when picking time, school wouldn't go on, we'd be out to pick cotton. They call it split turn.
Sending this kid off when you're 13 to a private girls' school, I wasn't prepared. They need to have prep school for that. It was in Vicksburg, Mississippi. It was All Saints Episcopal School for girls. It was between that or Lausanne and Memphis. And I picked it because I thought I could start all over, you know, I could be somebody different, you know. You're always you. You're always you. You got to start learning to like yourself and make yourself so you'd like yourself before you're anybody. And I think that's what happened out here. Is I came out here and I'm all right with it.
Although Judd Hill was a plantation, it was also a community.
They wasn't rude to you. You could be comfortable. You wasn't afraid. Back then, we wouldn't even lock a door. We didn't lock a door. We'd sleep with the stream open, windows raised on Judd Hill. Nobody would break in and steal nothing.
Jane Lee Shapin Riddle felt that Judd Hill produced some good people, and she couldn't help but reflect on her grandparents, who owned the farm but were raised in the city.
And I don't know if my grandfather really thought about. He was raised in the city, you know. He was raised up north, and it was a different time back then. So I don't know. I don't guess back then everybody was real close with families. You know, they were pretty much prim and proper, you know, and formal and all that stuff. You know, I don't know why we wouldn't have had a family atmosphere out here. You know, why it wouldn't have been a little bit more relaxed, a little bit more loving, you know, more accepting or whatever. But it wasn't. It was a hard place to grow up too. It was difficult. And you can ask any of the people that grew up around here. I don't think any of them, unless they were hired as housemaids, ever set foot in this house. They put an outhouse out there for the yard man, so he wouldn't come in. That's why the bathrooms were upstairs. My grandmother was paranoid. She didn't want anybody looking in or, you know, stuff like that. So it was. I never even got around this house. There's things around this house that I never even knew was in until I moved here.
I had to sit on the porch to eat my dinner, peanut butter and sandwich. I'd work 8 hours up there all day or something. And then they had an outhouse although I clean a bathroom in the house, but you had to go up to the outer house to the bathroom. I cleaned, and I never did cook. But they were pretty good to work for. But you know, they was real cheap wages. You know, like $4, when they go up to pay the men, it's $4 a day or something like that. They're just cheap wages.
Billy Baker has seen many families come through Judd Hill. He still remembers Sam Chapin.
There was a lot of black families here when we first came here. Had a lot of guys that I was friends with, you know, and worked together around here. The families that I knew real well, you know, they were just like what we were. They were trying to make a living. They were working on the farm. Had a good friend, Aaron Benson, that went to Vietnam, you know, paid the ultimate price and was killed there. Just a lot of history that goes into this place that would take a while to really sit down and you know, segment it and take, you know, little parts of it at a time. But it was just a regular community. You know, everybody, that far as I was aware of as a child, was getting along. Everything was fine. You know, it's tough times financially. Everybody had a hard time back then. Mr. Sam Chapin was one of the finest men that I ever met. Used to, when I would get through with my dad's crop, we got through working and got his, what they call laid by then, and, you know, got everything put away. He would come get me, and I would drive his highboy. And it was always funny. He would bring me a drink every morning and every afternoon. He would come by the field and he'd say, "Now, what's your favorite?" He called it pop. You know, he said, "What's your favorite pop?" And I said, "Dr. Pepper." And he would bring me a Pepsi every time. The afternoon he'd come back and he'd say, "What's your favorite drink? Your favorite pop?" And I said, "Dr. Pepper." He'd bring me a Pepsi. But he always wanted me to drive his chemical rig, you know, and put, even as young as I was then, probably 15, 16 years old. Every summer I'd drive that for him, you know. And Mrs. Chapin, she was kind of in the background during those days before we were growing up. She didn't really come to the forefront in the farming operation until Mr. Sam passed away. And then she kind of came in and started taking over. And their grandson was here, Juddy, nicknamed Corky. He was here. And I did a lot of work for them back in those days, you know, for what they call the day crop. What they were farming, we did the harvesting on it from about 79 on until they quit.
Sam Chapin died in 1976. Esther Chapin's grandson, Juddy, helped her run the farm until he left, which then became hard for Mrs. Chapin to run the farm.
But she couldn't have done it. Besides being 4'11" and a half, she'd never been out there. She could do it on paper. She was the bookkeeper, but she couldn't get out there and do what needed to be done. And I think she just tore her up because it was not going to be the way she thought it would be. So that's why she got the lawyer to say that they would have the Judd Hill Foundation in perpetuum as a cotton farm.
Mrs. Chapin set up the Judd Hill Foundation in 1986. At that time, local attorney Mike Gibson began to help Mrs. Chapin with the foundation. The foundation did little until 1991 when Mrs. Chapin died. Mrs. Chapin left her entire estate to the Judd Hill Foundation with the exception of a small piece of property where Jane Lee now lives. Mrs. Chapin was 91 at her death.
My responsibility as trustee, I don't own the farm, but I'm the beneficial owner, and it's my responsibility to see if the farm is taken care of, it's operating property. I'm in charge of any capital improvements that are made on the farm. We crop share in the rent with Mr. Baker and his son that farms the land. So, you know, I'm responsible, and I accept that responsibility that Ms. Chapin gave to me. She requested that the income from this farm be used for agricultural experimentation and research, especially in the areas of fertilization, the different varieties of seeds, and water conservation. In addition, she was interested in rural health care. So the foundation has been a supporter of both agricultural research and experiments as well as rural health care. It's quite an asset that she left to the foundation for these purposes. And the income that is generated from the farm annually in rural health care, it goes to the University of Arkansas Medical School at Little Rock, principally for the AHEC program in Northeast Arkansas, which is headquartered in Jonesboro. In addition, we have the annual Judd Hill Field Day here on the farm that attracts some 500 farmers or people interested in agriculture annually. Also, it's a first here on the farm that I'm aware of, where Arkansas State University and the University of Arkansas Schools of Agriculture have partnershiped, and we have set aside some acreage for that purpose for cotton research. And I hope to see more of that. So that's why the Judd Hill Foundation is so important for economic development in the field of agriculture, especially in Northeast Arkansas, as well as promoting rural health care.
Mrs. Chapin's granddaughter lives on a small portion of the plantation, but has no connection to the foundation.
When I first met Ms. Chapin, I was an attorney and I was practicing with Oscar Findler in Blytheville, and that's the occasion that I met her. There was litigation ongoing involving members of the family, and I don't harbor, of course, any ill will at all. We all live in harmony and peace right here together, but I don't have that much contact. I have spoken to the granddaughter occasionally, but the other two children I have not spoken to since Ms. Chapin's death.
After she died and the lawyer got the place, before we settled, they called us up, all of us on a conference call, and they asked us what we would want if we settled with the Gibson. And I said, well, I'd like to have Judd Hill, and I meant the area that I would consider the town proper, you know, the church and all that stuff, the store and all that. But anyway, when we got done with it, I had the 46 acres here in the middle. So here they gave me the house in like 2 days. All of a sudden, I've got it.
There's a great future out there, I think, for agriculture in growing crops that are edible, food crops, which can be grown and used as preventive medicine. For example, rice is already being grown with insulin, where you can eat rice and receive insulin. And if you can think, if there's food products that we could grow that could go in, especially to third world countries and children around the world, that would give them preventive medicine in the food to make us all healthier and stronger. And I would like to see this farm be a part of that research, which is already, as you know, ongoing at the Arkansas Biosciences Center at Arkansas State University.
One of the first gifts from the Judd Hill Foundation was to the Arkansas State University and established the Judd Hill Chair for Environmental Sciences. Later on, another endowed chair from the foundation funded the Agricultural Biotechnology Distinguished Chair. Another major gift from the Judd Hill Foundation established the Judd Hill Foundation building on our campus here at ASU, and then there's also been a major gift to the College of Nursing. My involvement in the foundation has been on applied research at the plantation, and it's been very beneficial to my research program and to our efforts here at Arkansas State University.
Ongoing research at Judd Hill includes variety developments, new cotton farming, and more.
I would say some of the best research that has been done at Judd Hill has involved soil and water conservation work, and providing better tools to producers to manage their soil resources and to manage water. We have a oncoming water deficit problem in the state, and the applied research that we have at Judd Hill is going to help produce recommendations that will help our producers use water in a really smart way to maximize their profits as well as to minimize use, to preserve water resources for Northeast Arkansas. Research this past year involved irrigation timing and use of biosolids and alternative nitrogen sources for fertilizing cotton. And the irrigation timing, we were looking at when to start irrigation and when to stop it, and that's really important. Timing can make the difference between a profit and not profitable crop year. And the research turned out really well, that you could apply just a few irrigations and maximize profit. But if the timing is off, you actually spend more money than you make with the cotton crop. Within that experiment, we were also looking at nitrogen sources. And one of these nitrogen fertilizer sources was a slow release fertilizer, so that after application, it slowly releases into the soil and the cotton plant takes it as needed, rather than being released all at once and can be washed away in irrigation water with the rain event. So the fertilizer is available to the cotton plant and not moving out into the environment. And both of those research experiments have worked out really well.
Further cutting-edge research includes the areas of irrigation and soil conservation.
One of the best experiments that I have conducted at Judd Hill involved irrigation termination, when to make the final irrigation on cotton. Significant resources have been allocated through the foundation to help in soil and water conservation and rural health care. I think those can never be forgotten, what the foundation was established for. And to have applied research to help with soil and water conservation, I think cannot be overemphasized. These are precious resources, and the support that we get from the Judd Hill Foundation is significant.
The course of time changed this plot of land from undeveloped timber to a thriving plantation and community deeply impacting those who's living there, to a research facility today, impacting the world. The Judd Hill Plantation is certainly more than just a farm.